Hello. So we come to episode 5 of Deal Maker Nick, my life story. And in this story, we're going to talk about me teaming up with TC Tony Calder and some deals I did with Virgin Music and a very interesting story about the call notes and why you should be in control of everything you need to be. Anyway, let's get into the video and we'll go from there. Bye. So episode 5 really takes us up to the end of 1986 and the end of my first spell in the music business. So to keep you sort of up to date on everything, between 1981 and 1986, I think it was, when I teamed up with Tony Calder again, I was always kept in touch. I was always invited to a few parties at his house in Belgravia. And generally have a chat to him, etc. And so there was always a bond there, etc. Anyway, in the prior to that actually happening, there were two other stories that I think are quite important. The first one was, I think it just shows you, if you don't have legal contracts and you're not prepared to enforce your legal rights, you're always going to come a bit of a cropper. And one of these was a deal I did for Clive Solomon at Virgin with Virgin Music. He was looking to do a deal, and I managed to broker him a fantastic deal with Virgin Music because I had all the connections, etc. And he got a fairly large amount of money for the time. At that time of life, it was quite a lot of money. And anyway, my commission around that time, I was your Mr. 10% man. Anyway, I got paid 5%, and it was really take it or go to court and leave it, etc. And everything in the music business around that sort of time is really, unless you were an artist, you didn't really have enforceable contracts, and that's a lesson to be learned about very early in life about having contracts that you can legally enforce, etc. So that was one story. The other story is I also got involved with a band called the Cool Notes via our client Abstract Records, who had the artist. But not only was the record company, the joint manager, Edward was the joint manager of the band, and I got involved in doing licensing deals in Europe for the single "You're Never Too Young," which their first single got to number 42, and the subsequent singles, which were "Spend the Night" and "In Your Car," and their debut album. And they had a lot of potential, this band. I did very much saw the two, in essence, it was a 7-8 piece band, but like most 7 or 8 pieces band, there was probably 3 people that really mattered in the band, the 2 lead singers and one other. But that was that. And it was one of those things where it just shows you what happens when you don't have control. Because in essence, I was a business advisor to the band indirectly via Abstract. So I was only, for example, I was only dealing with one manager and not 2 managers. But to cut a long story short, when things didn't work out with EMI New York, everything else, I was able to broker a deal with another American record company, which was a fantastic deal. I'd obviously been a lot of my life's about packaging. So I'd been able to agree to get Richard James Burgess to produce the band through his agent Janice at the time. And I then put a deal together with this American record company, which was 2 albums guaranteed with an option for 3 subsequent 2 albums. So it's an 8-album deal. And I believe the advance at that time was somewhere in the region of 150,000 or 175,000 US dollars an album. You've got to remember, we're talking around 85, 86. I can't be exact on the time, but it was, a time when, that was a lot of money. But to cut a long story short, there was throwings and goings, and the band went a different way. They actually gave up being a band, which is really, really sad. I thought they had a lot of potential. I thought if they could get back to writing the songs along the lines of, You're Never Too Young and Spend the Night, they could have been a successful soul band. Who knows how big they would have been. But that's another story for another day. But the lessons learned from that is you should always be in control. So yeah, finally in this little story, Tony Calder set up a company called Dynamic Marketing Systems in 1986, which the idea was to follow on from the independent distribution labels that had been successful. He brought in John Howes, who had been very successful with Jeff Hannington at IDS as an independent distributor. And they brought a few other consultants. Ray Jenks was a consultant who was also from RCA background, etc., etc. Lovely, lovely people in a nice little office, Muse office in the back end of South Kensington somewhere. Can't remember the address exactly. And I came as the international exploitation manager, and it worked out really, really well. I was really enjoying being back. But what I did learn is I didn't have the relationship second time around with Tony Calder that I had first time around, which is very sad. But that's just the way things go in life. I later found out. I later worked out in my life, actually, in doing these videos and writing my life story. I was able to find out why that was the reason. And this sort of culminated finally in the end with me having a sort of heart-to-heart meeting with Tony's wife in a flat in Bayswater around this time. And in essence, Tony Calder was actually being held in custody in prison in Switzerland at this time. I didn't know the reasons why, but I think anybody in the record industry knows the reasons why. But in this video, I just don't think it's my right to share that. Safe to say, he was left 3 or 4 months. He was back in the UK 3 or 4 months later, and that ended quite well. But I'm pretty much sure I don't know what actually happened in between. But that was probably the beginning and the end of Tony and Karen, which is very sad. And then finally, to bring me to the end, John Howes, who I worked with, invited me late 1986, early 1987 to share an office in Berwick Street, at the bottom of Record Shack, which was very, very nice. I also met a guy there called Dennis Lloyd, who he brought in, who would later have an involvement, who I would have a business involvement later down the road, so to speak. And we went to Meedem together. We actually drove down in the car together, and we stopped off in Leon, had a nice dinner in Leon. We stayed overnight in Leon and then drove. So it was a very, very nice experience. And I remember doing Meedem, really, really good. And then it sort of came to a realization around about March 1987 that maybe at this moment in time, the record business wasn't for me. But we'll cover that in episode 6. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you like the video, hit the like and please hit the subscribe button. And I look forward to seeing you in episode 6.
Thanks for watching the video, and please feel free to connect with me on my personal website, nickstewart.co. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Bye for now.